Happy Monday. Thank you for joining me for this week's Weekly Wisdom. Now, we are going to be talking about the second chapter in the upcoming book, Unlocking the Magic of Leadership: 5 Keys to Inspire Yourself, Empower Others, and Drive Extraordinary Results. So the second chapter is Check Yourself Before You Wreck Yourself. For all my 90s people, you know this, but if you're not familiar with the phrase, it simply means check in with yourself before you do something stupid. So in this chapter, we start breaking down like what happens when we are in that emotionally heightened situation. Whether it's your employees coming to you and they are going off on you about a new change that you're rolling out, or it's something happening with your family, or you're finding that you're a little bit more raw than you normally are, so things are bothering you more than they normally would. What are some of those things that you can do proactively so that you don't do or say something that goes against your values and who you are? So the first thing for this, and this is especially important if your employees or someone you love, a relationship of some kind, this individual is coming to you and they have heightened emotions. Very first thing, let them feel their feels. We need to allow space for people to bring their full version of themselves, even when that emotion might make us a little bit uncomfortable. I'm not a fan of tears. When somebody comes to me with tears, it's not that like I'm upset that they're crying. It's I don't know what to do. I want to help this person and I feel completely helpless. So when somebody comes to me with tears, I'm quiet because I know whatever I say or do in that moment is probably not going to be helpful. It's going to be more for me than for them. So I create that space that allows them to feel whatever that feeling is. One of the rules that I had for my cast members when I was leading them at Disney was when we go into a room and it's just you and I, if you need to yell, scream, and holler, do whatever you got to do to work through that emotion, I'm here for you. You do it. As long as it doesn't get personal, you don't start calling me names or anything like that. You work through those emotions the way that you need to work through them. Just because they would work through it differently than I would didn't make it wrong. So give them space to feel their feels. Allow emotions, even the ones that we're not comfortable with, into the space. If you're giving somebody feedback and telling them that they're not doing a very good job, and then you expect them to be like, okay, great, thank you so much for the feedback, I really appreciate it. Who needs to check their expectations? It's not them. Now, the second thing for check yourself before you wreck yourself is the power of silence. When we're in these moments where somebody's come in, the emotions are heightened, it's okay to have moments of silence. See what I did there? Now, the reason for this is to allow the other person to process information. My husband Miles and I, before we were married, we were fighting about something, and I would get really frustrated when we would argue because it felt like he just wasn't in the conversation. He just didn't care. And I was talking to my leader, Diane, one day, and I was talking about how frustrated I was. And she looked at me with this kind of knowing smirk, and she said, did you give him time to respond? I felt a little called out, if I'm being honest. And then I realized she wasn't wrong. No, I didn't give him time. I moved from A to Z like that. He's a processor. He needed time to think through what we were talking about. So that evening, when I went home, we continued the conversation. And then when I was done talking, I stopped and I made myself stay quiet. And lo and behold, he joined in the conversation because he had time to process, think through what I had said, and determine how he wants to respond. When we're in those moments of heightened emotions, silence is not a bad thing. It feels awkward, it feels uncomfortable, but it's not a bad thing. Because if you think about when you have to give constructive feedback to somebody, chances are you have been thinking about this for like a week, if not longer. When you give that feedback to that person, they have just heard it. They need time to process and think through what that is. Now, the third piece to check yourself before you wreck yourself is understanding that you don't have to have all of the answers. As leaders, we are paid to have the answers. We get our paycheck by solving problems and coming up with solutions. And when somebody comes up and says, this is my pain point, we say, we have a solution for that. So it's really uncomfortable to sit in that sometimes we don't have all the answers. And when somebody comes to you and they're sharing with you something they're going through, maybe they're getting a divorce, or maybe they just found out somebody that they love is sick, or maybe they're losing their house, you're not going to have the answers for that. Or when your company is implementing change at a large scale and your employees are coming to you and they're like, we hate this, you're not going to have the answer for that. And that's okay, because I need to prepare you for what I'm about to say. It is said out of love and respect. You are not perfect, and you're not meant to be. And it's okay that you're not perfect. And so sometimes we need to slow down before we just start talking to talk, because we're uncomfortable with not having the answer. So when we think about how to check ourselves before we wreck ourselves, it's remembering, give the individual in front of you the space to feel their feels. Allow for silence. And remember that you don't have to have all the answers. So with that, that is it for this week. I can't wait to talk to you next week. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, emotional outbursts, anything like that, go ahead and reach out. Have an amazing week. And don't forget, as always, you got this. I'll see you next week.